Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Welcome also to the Copper Coins Book 3, Part 3. I'm excited to get back to Copper Coins. I know we've been having kind of weird schedules on and off, but this week's a normal schedule. So, yay. Anyway, regards to the stream. This is a chill stream, so what that means is occasionally I will be talking to my lovely book garden or my book, myself. I do love my side comments. Sometimes also if there's a word that I want to clarify or just look up and see what does this look like. I will look it up and usually share what I find. This is not everyone's kind of stream, which more than okay, but maybe stick around. You never know, you might end up enjoying it. If not, no hard feelings. But anyway, this is also a mature stream. So what that means is there will be themes of violence, gore, sexy times. And if you're not of age, please don't watch. I want everybody to like overall it's usually pretty fine, but we do get mature themes. In regards to that, for those watching live, sometimes we do have triggering things being read. And if you're here later, and if there's something that I feel is potentially triggering, I will mark it and timestamp it, have it in the title, and have a short, simplified description in my description. However, if you're here live, there's only so much I can do. Like usually I get a feel of, hey, things are getting darker, something might be about to happen, can give a little more warning, but there's no guarantee about that. If there are things that trigger you and you feel like it's kind of starting to head there, there's absolutely no problem in leaving and coming back later when things might be marked. What's important is your mental health and your mental well-being. We're here for a good time, a fun time, and sometimes a sexy time. Not a bad time. So you do what you need to do, in whatever way that means. So, yeah. All right, moving right along. I am not sponsored. If I ever do become sponsored, you all will be the first to know, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, ever, or ever. But yeah. The only thing that I do own is the physical copy that's sitting behind me at my time, and sometimes not even that. So yeah. I am also not fluent. I do my best, but you will notice this especially when I go over names and places, though I have been getting better. But yes, if I am egregiously butchering something, please let me know, usually in the comments. Or the like. Hello, Annika. How are you today? But please be nice about it. I am doing this for fun just because I enjoy doing it and want to get these books out there. But I also want people to be able to enjoy it, and butchering language is not one of the ways I try to do that. So, yeah, constructive criticism, yes. Hello, Cookielicious. Welcome as well. How are you doing? Okay, now that that's all out of the way, I have some goodies to show off before we get started. So, I'm going to start with the silly one. I have another piece coming, but look at, I found him. I know some people have seen the like Hua Chang and Shilian versions, but they had a Lan Wangji one and I couldn't resist. He's ridiculous. I have a Wei Wuxian one coming. It is not here yet. I did get the Noodle Boy. Pretty good, crazy busy, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Hopefully, it's good busy, but yes. So let's see, where should I put him? Should I put him up here? You can sit on my monitor. There you go. I'll just chill up on my monitor. That's awesome. Next, so there was that book I recommended a while ago with the green cover called Strange Pictures. I was walking around my local Asian bookstore, and they have a manga. This is actually the manga version of like the first part of the story, which I was like, oh my goodness. Like, what a coincidence. Yeah. Got my SVSS box set, but it came damaged, so I've been sad because it was very expensive. Oh no. See if you contact whoever you bought it from, because that's not okay. See if they can send a replacement, or if you send it back, you can get it. I know with those special editions, it's so hard. But like, again, with the special editions, those things were really expensive and you expect it to come not damaged. So yeah, definitely see if they can fix that somehow, because that's not cool. But yes, hello Truffle, and yes, very cool manga. So this is the book that I was reading before, the one with the green cover. It actually tells the same story, and it's dropping things, hitting things. Don't know what that did. Oh well. But yeah. So that's a fun thing. It's just kind of Infinity Knot, I think it's called. My sister-in-law actually got this for me a while ago. It's really cool. It's one of those necklaces. It was like at a World's Fair. But yeah. I just felt like wearing it today. Jazz it up a little bit. Got it from my local bookstore, so it's hard to get a replacement. Yeah. I mean, all you can do is ask. I mean, the answer might still be no, but if you don't ask, you don't know. And thank you. It's a fun one. So speaking of special editions, I did get my edition of Little Mushroom. So funny story about this though, I did end up forgetting that I ordered this from Yigi Bean, and I got my special edition magnet set. But I also ordered one from Amazon, and I returned that today. But no, of course I have to buy the special editions because this was the one that started this channel off. So let's see. Ooh, oh, that's gorgeous. So pretty. Maybe Anja had been right. He really was just a little mushroom. Yes. Love it. Love it so much. Oh, the extended pictures. Absolutely gorgeous. Love it. Our boys. So pretty. Love it. anime content creators getting into Little Mushroom lately. It's so cool to see it getting more love. It truly is. Hello, Ember Place. How are you doing today? All right. And then the cool extra thing from Yiggy Bean that they gave me is fridge magnets. So I'll show those real quick and then we'll go ahead and get started. How did you guys like the card special on Thursday? And I'm glad you're doing good, Ember. So yeah, these are the cutesy magnets. So you got Anja in my shaky hands. This is one of the researchers. Yes. His mom. Sorry for how shaky it is. And like, oh, the mushroom soup. And then and of course we end with handcuffs. Because why wouldn't we? So yeah. Does anyone have anything that they want to share from the weekend or last week? I know it was such a weird time because we did Monday and then it's been a week since we've actually streamed live. So a lot can happen in the week. So what's up? While we do that, I will grab the book. Scooch my keyboard back, hopefully without hitting any space bars or any other buttons. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed the card video. Ooh. Enjoyed the card video, very ASMR-y. I'm doing another show in Chicago. It's an anime meetup market thing in September. That sounds amazing. Got my computer fixed up, ran loads of errands today, and also spent today looking up all the information on Jackie of Big Bear. I don't know about Jackie of Big Bear. And thank you, Truffle. I'm glad you thought the card video was great. Okay. I was very happy that I went and was able to help my brother. He's managing okay because he has one of those like it's like a scooter for his leg because he can't put pressure on it. And he manages really well with it, but there's only so much you can do when you're doing like horse chores and have chickens and a turkey and cats and dogs, like, so that's why I went a little early. But everything worked out well. I was able to help him, and it was just nice to see him because I get to see him maybe once or twice a year. So was nice. And I'm glad everything worked out with the card video. So that was my time. And Jackie's an eagle, the matriarch of the Big Bear Valley Nest. Nice. Been a bad month for animals in my little corner of the universe. I'm sure the animals appreciated your help. Well, I can actually show you the horses real quick. I don't think I took a picture of the turkey. He kept trying to escape out, and I was more focused on kind of the chores. So there was that. I can show you the horses though. So this is Aria. She's a bit more temperamental, but she's very, very pretty. And this is Boonie Boy. He's a sweetheart. He's definitely more chill. Jackie unfortunately passed yesterday. No, he kept trying to escape. Like the chickens can wander, the turkey doesn't know what's going on. So yeah. I'm so sorry about the eagle though. So my brother actually ended up trading some car service for half a pig and a turkey because he's a mechanic. So that's like, I mean, he got like the discount rate and all that. So yeah, that's kind of how he ended up getting a turkey. It was not planned. It just kind of was like, oh, I'll throw in a turkey. It was like, I guess. No, it is. Basically what happened was he used his rate for parts, so like actual market price, and ended up paying the difference for the half a pig. And yeah, it worked out really well. He definitely believes in bartering and is very good at bartering. So. But anyway, let's get to reading. All right, what time is it? Excuse me. Lamanji. I'm going to scoot you over a bit. 18:15. Okay. So, last time we ended with Shi Tuzhang, Lu Nianxi splitting off to go down the mountain that they all arrived on, because they're basically searching for the rest of the bones, and there was a resonance on this last mountain. But they also sensed it was dangerous, so they sent them off to avoid casualties. Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nianxi knew their limits and didn't want to become burdens. Without argument, they both nodded, told Xu Xian and Xuan Min to careful, and headed down the path toward the county gate. Xu Xian and Xuan Min exchanged a glance and swiftly made their way up the mountainside. After scanning the area, they spotted a concealed stone staircase deep in the woods, which led to a wide open building built on a relatively flat area. It wasn't a ruined temple or a rusting pavilion. Xu Xian took a deep breath of the mountain breeze coming from that direction and grimaced in disgust. The stench of corpses. They climbed the stairs without hesitation and stood before the open door of the building. Shushan nearly staggered back from the overwhelming odor the moment he stopped. The smell could knock out a whole village. What kind of cursed place is this? The building's ceiling was unusually high, around 5 yards taller than the average house, which is 15 feet taller than the average house. That's pretty significant. There was a wooden threshold at the door, but it was carved with twisted winding symbols and studded with nails along the edges. The entire threshold seemed to have been soaked or splashed with some kind of blood, leaving it dark and perpetually damp. Ew. It exuded a rusty metallic stench that mingled nauseatingly with the pervasive odor of rot. The building had no large windows, only 2 narrow ventilation openings high up on the walls, like pinpricks. With so little light, the interior was dark and damp. Any living person would have been uncomfortable to stand near it, let alone try to peer inside. Shushan frowned and waved a hand in front of his nose, but it was useless. Resigned, he held his breath and scanned the area. Hanging on either side of the door was a pair of inscribed plaques, but they were so weathered that parts were missing. How the heck did an ant get in my book? That happened. After scrutinizing them, he finally made out 8 words. The dead walk here. The living keep away. That sounded familiar. Shushan turned to Xuanmin with a questioning look. Given Xuanmin's temperament, asking him to open his mouth in such an environment was worse than death. The moment Shushan silently posed his question, he felt his wrist being lifted. Xuanmin, expressionless, traced a few characters on his palm. Corpse shop. A corpse shop. Shushan had heard of such places. In the region around the Xiang River, there were artisans who specialized in handling the dead. They escorted those who died far from home back for burial. They traveled only at night and avoided the living during the day. Oh, hello, Ruby. Welcome. How are you doing today? We're just starting the recap, so you haven't missed anything. Just chatting and showing off a couple things and seeing how everyone's doing. They traveled only at night and avoided the living during the day. Since their journeys were long and couldn't be completed in one night, especially in rain or snow, every few miles there'd be stations for the artisans and corpses to rest and shelter from the rain. These were called corpse shops. Shushan had little contact with such matters, so his knowledge was limited, but as far as he knew, corpse handlers had strict rules. Most only took bodies before decomposition had set in. Otherwise, wouldn't they have left rotting flesh and maggots wherever they went? The stench alone would have been unbearable. So for this corpse shop to reek so horribly was unusual. Resigned, Shushan covered his nose and mouth, then steeled himself and stepped inside. He glanced back at Xuanmin. Outwardly, Xuanmin looked composed, his only reaction a faint frown that betrayed his disgust for the smell and filth. But Shushan could read a trace of indescribable resignation in his dark, still eyes. Shushan almost laughed. It wasn't funny in itself, but the juxtaposition with Xuanmin was so stark it was almost amusing. Before the smile could form, though, he was hit by a bolt of realization. Xuanmin was always reserved, his emotions buried deep and impenetrable. Most people could stare at him for ages and not decipher his thoughts. Shushan often struggled to understand his moods, too. Somehow, in this moment, he could sense Xuanmin's emotions. effortlessly even, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It hit Shushan then. The copper coins. It was because of the connection forged by these coins. Their bond had grown stronger with each use, to the point where even subtle emotions could pass between them. Shushan's smile shifted uncertainly. Who knew if this connection was good or bad? If it deepened further, would he be able to tell if his happiness was his own or influenced by Xuan Min's emotions? If he was sad, was it doubled? Would it double because of Xuan Min's feelings? Worst of all, if Xuan Min's reactions were reaching him, did that mean his own emotions and impulses were also reaching Xuan Min, including that almost spoken urge earlier? That would mean they were far too involved with each other. Just thinking about it made Shu Xian feel like he should discard his dignity and flee. He decided to tell Xuan Min about this change once they left. They should sever it if possible to avoid unnecessary complications. When he came out of his thoughts, Xuan Min was watching him, clearly puzzled by his awkward, odd half-smile. Shu Xian waved him off and spoke without thinking. What? Ignore me. After the words left his mouth, he rolled his eyes, feeling like his soul had left his body. Xuan Min stared at him, but did not reply. Shu Xian turned his focus to the interior of the building, which was emptier than he had expected. In fact, the entire building was nearly devoid of objects. No tables, chairs, or even stone stools to sit on. By the faint light from the ventilation holes, Shu Xian walked along the walls. Compared to the emptiness of the middle, they had more to offer. Nailed to them at intervals were palm-sized semicircular iron hoops, fixed into the stone on both ends with a slight arc in the middle. These hoops were always paired, spaced about a person's width apart, lining all four walls in a full circle. This is a hilarious form of gay panic. Oh no, I almost asked him to move in with me. Yeah. Oh no, I want a codependent relationship. Shushan studied them and noticed frayed hemp rope fibers on a few. That made their purpose clear. When corpse handlers rested here, they would lean the standing bodies against the walls and tie them to the loops. Hoops. Partially to prevent them from slumping to the floor, but also to keep them from reanimating. Suddenly, his steps halted. One of the hoops had a smear of blood on it. Whether it was accidentally smeared on or splattered, it was unmistakably fresh. Without looking away, Shushan tapped Xuan Min and pointed at the bloody hoop. Xuan Min's brow furrowed briefly before smoothing out. He gestured at the corner he'd been standing in. Following Xuan Min's finger, Shushan spotted a coiled hemp rope and some crumpled paper on the ground. Yeah, Shushan is down bad. He had initially dismissed them as leftover trash and walked past them without a second glance. But if Xuan Min pointed them out, it couldn't have been that simple. Shushan still couldn't figure it out after pondering for a little while, so he dutifully held out his palm to Xuan Min. Xuan Min paused, then wrote with one finger. Translocation Array. Compared to spoken words, writing on Shushan's palm was less comprehensive, and Xuan Min couldn't write anything too complicated, so he only traced 3 quick characters. There was no time to dwell on the array's real name. But Shushan understood what Xuan Min meant. Just like the person who'd vanished from Mount Lian Jiang, someone here had used an array to teleport right before they had arrived. When they put it all together, it meant the person who'd escaped was almost certainly the one Shu Xian was chasing. It was just... Xuanmin wrote on Shu Xian's palm again. More than one person. Shu Xian crouched beside the insignificant-looking rope and paper balls. The stench of corpses accumulated over years was even stronger near the ground, so he covered his nose and mouth. Up close, he saw a circle drawn in blood on the ground, rope coiled at its edge. The paper balls, talismans soaked in dried blood, were set around it. Beyond that, Shu Xian spotted something else. Near the corner, by the crevice in the wall, lay a few slender needles, stained with dark blood, almost camouflaged on the ground. They would have been invisible without careful inspection. There were many uses for such needles, but in this foul environment, with the sudden disappearance Lu Nianxi had spoken of, only one came to mind. In risky situations, some sorcerers used corpse generals, reanimated corpses that appeared almost human but were controlled by the sorcerer as substitutes. At the critical moment, pulling out their needles turned them back into lifeless bodies, and the dead never appeared in Lu Nianxi's divination results. If this was the case, the identity of the mastermind behind it was obvious. Having come this far, they were only steps away from the culprit. Shu Xian wasn't about to give up. He grabbed Xuanmin's hand and wrote, "Can the array still be used?" "Give chase," Xuanmin wrote back. Shu Xian nodded. "Array is broken, but can be restored," Xuanmin concluded. With that, he pricked his finger and let blood drip onto the paper balls in a specific order. When the last drop had landed, the rusty blood circle brightened as if reactivated. Xuanmin motioned for Shu Xian to step into the circle. It was narrow and barely fit one person, so the previous group had probably left one by one. Shu Xian stood out inside its bounds, about to go ahead, when he noticed Xuanmin's faint frown as he prepared to seal the array. Given Xuanmin's fastidiousness, staying in this building a moment longer would have been torture. Without thinking, Shu Xian grabbed his arm and yanked him into the circle just as the array activated. The force of this action caught Xuanmin off balance, and he crashed into Shu Xian. A gust of wind erupted from the blood circle. With a resonant hum, their surroundings changed. All right, so that's where we ended last time. And not gonna lie, I am definitely looking forward to what's coming next. I can't help but thinking they're like walking into a trap, because that seems, it's smart. Hey, we're following the trail, but also it's like you literally just reactivated someone else's array. So like, you also just pulled another person in. Is this gonna mess with the array? Like, so I'm just a little bit like, should some shenanigans seem afoot? All right, going to some tea, hopefully not burn my mouth. All right. Okay. Oh yeah, and as always, if there's any buffering, let me know. I will reset it. Okay. Chapter 33, Bai Chong Cave. Once they were in their new location, Shushan experienced a twinge of regret for his earlier action. Then Xuanmin slammed into him with immense force. The two stumbled several steps, half embracing, half grabbing at each other. Oh my. Shushan's back slammed into a jagged rocky wall with a thud, and Xuanmin, carried by inertia, crashed heavily into him. Sharp points dug painfully into Shushan's shoulders and back, sending waves of pain radiating through him. He couldn't suppress a muffled groan from the unexpected impact. Yeah, oof. However, the back of his head, which should have been the most vulnerable, didn't hit anything sharp. Instead, it pressed against something much softer that cushioned the force from a blow. Did Xuanmin block the back of his head with his hand? Over the back of his head, it took him a second to process that Xuanmin had reached out to shield him just before impact. Oh! What Shushan's head had fallen against was Xuanmin's hand. That's so cute! Speaking of shenanigans, I'm really enjoying Villain's White Halo. It's a good one. No. I'm so glad that we're gonna... No. We didn't pick that one. It was very close. But yes. We picked Cat. Did we pick Cat? Yes, we picked Cat. No, Villain's White Halo is really good. There's so much shenanigans. Shushan stiffened, then abruptly straightened up, and tugged Xuanmin's hand from against the wall and into view. This might have been the first time Shushan understood what it meant to be careful. He knew full well that Xuanmin was no ordinary person. His body wasn't made of paper, nor would it fall apart from a little force. Still, Xuanmin's hand was scraped raw in several places by the sharp rocks. Some cuts were deep, while others were just superficial scratches, but the sheer number of them made for a gruesome sight. Blood quickly welled up and dripped down his hand. Xuanmin is such a green flag, and it is so sweet, I agree. Shushan was no stranger to blood. He'd seen and endured wounds far worse than this. But the myriad of small injuries on Xuanmin's hand still made Shushan's heart prickle with discomfort. His memories of causing Xuanmin trouble for no reason when they'd first met seemed like a lifetime ago. It's fine. Like Shushan, Xuanmin wasn't one to fuss over his own injuries. As he tried to withdraw his hand, he patted Shushan on the shoulder with the other. Did you hurt any bones in your back? I'm missing a good chunk of those bones. What's there to hurt? He might not say much, but his actions speak for him. Yes, they do. I'm missing a good chunk of those bones. What's there to hurt? Shushan said, not thinking of his back at all. Stop pulling your hand away. Those are some good ones. I have not read Stars of Chaos, but Disabled Tyrant is a fantastic one. I love that one. He pinched Xuanmin's uninjured ring and little fingers, then tugged his hand closer for inspection. Shushan was about to lower his head when Xuanmin swiftly cupped the dragon's forehead with his free hand to stop him. Don't be reckless. Xuanmin's voice carried a hint of exasperation. Reckless? Shushan blinked up at him, baffled. Why are you stopping me? Xuanmin's dark eyes held his gaze like he wanted to say something, but he settled into silence instead. Shushan blinked again. Oh, you thought I was going to. Lick your wounds the way I did last time? Xuanmin neither confirmed nor denied it, but his eyes flickered. That was as good as an admission. Dream on. Shushan was both embarrassed and annoyed, but the sight of Xuanmin's bloodied hand deflated his flash of temper. Honestly, I just wanted to check if there was a way to make these scrapes heal faster. Who knows, a puff of dragon breath might do the trick. After all, every part of me is precious. Might have to. I think I have the first couple books of Stars of Chaos, but might have to give that one a try. It's got a lot in front of it, but we shall see. Shushan saw nothing wrong with the statement, but Xuanmin's expression twitched with something unreadable before smoothing over. He withdrew his hand and stopped meeting Shushan's eyes. Just scratches, hardly worth calling injuries, he said. Then he nodded toward the path ahead. We should focus on catching up. Maybe they need some dragon saliva. Don't lick it. Have we learned nothing? Shushan knew such minor injuries meant nothing to either of them, so he didn't insist. Besides, aside from dragon saliva, he couldn't think of any way to speed up Xuanmin's healing. He let Xuanmin pull his hand away and followed him deeper into the passage. They seemed to have landed in a cave deep within the mountains. A narrow stone passage extended from where they stood, its walls slanted inward until it sealed shut at the very top. Shushan and Xuanmin walked single file, forced to duck their heads due to their height. Shushan noted the sharp rocks jutting from the passage walls. There's blood stains. The blood smelled like old iron, and its color was dark. It definitely wasn't fresh blood from Xuanmin's hand. Shushan guessed it was from whoever had teleported here earlier, scraping against the rocks while squeezing through. And it wasn't just the walls that were stained. The uneven ground also seemed soaked in old blood. The sticky sensation underfoot was deeply unpleasant. How much blood is there on the ground for it to actually create that sticky sensation? Like that would have to be like puddles of blood. Like not just like, oh, there's some dots. Like Xuanmin agreed from ahead. The blood on the ground is thick. Many people must have passed. I should have just kept reading. More than one and many carried different implications. Xuanmin's tone sounded grave, as if the blood-soaked path was beyond expectation. Beyond his expectations. This wasn't the work of one or two people, not even 7 or 8. For this much blood to have accumulated, at least 100 or more must have passed through here, dripping half-coagulated blood as they went. Oh boy. The spot where they had arrived received some faint light from above, but the farther they went, the darker it became. After they rounded a bend, the passage widened slightly, but the dim light was completely cut off, plunging them into utter darkness. Fortunately, Shushan's vision was far superior to an ordinary human's, and he could make out vague outlines even in such darkness. He took a few steps forward, intending to switch places with Xuanmin, but then Xuanmin caught Shushan's wrist with great accuracy. So demanding. Does he have eyes on his hands? Nonetheless, Xuanmin's attention wasn't entirely unpleasant. Despite Shushan's exasperated expression, he slowed his pace so he could stay shoulder to shoulder with Xuanmin instead of pushing ahead. The two walked side by side through the narrow passage until an abrupt step down appeared. As they descended, the oppressive walls fell away, opening into a wider space. Yet, Shushan's movements halted abruptly. He grabbed Xuanmin's arm, stopping him mid-step, and traced a character on his palm. Wait. Why do I feel like they're about to walk into, like, a coliseum? Xuanmin froze in place. They both held their breaths, scanning their darkened surroundings. Normally, moving silently wouldn't have been difficult for them, but the blood on the passage floor was so sticky that even their careful steps produced faint sounds. Yuck. The passage was eerily quiet and amplified the slightest rustle of fabric. Those tiny sounds bounced back and forth in the dark stone tunnel, forming overlapping echoes that masked other subtle noises. Until they stopped moving. Then, the faint skittering sounds became unmistakable. It was a light, rapid tap, like a butterfly skimming water, but incessant, one after another, on and on and on. Whether due to the echoes or some other reason, the sound came not from one direction, but all around. Overhead, to the sides, ahead, the skittering grew closer. Shushian's expression shifted. Do you still have fire starters? Light one. Even in a whisper, his voice was jarringly loud, and his words bounced off the walls 3 times before they faded. In the middle of that, the skittering sounds abruptly ceased, then erupted into a frenzy, accompanied by a buzzing vibration, like the rapid flapping of wings. All right, what do we think? Bats? Bees? Or just continue with the bee, insects, butterflies? Although bats aren't insects, so. Bats, bees, or butterflies? What do we think? As Schwanman pulled out a fire starter, something occurred to him. The moment he struck it alight, he hurled it forward. Boom! Bees would be very Donmei. Hybrid of all for fun. Countless wings beat at once, the sheer volume nauseating. Dark shadows surged from every direction to swarm the tiny flame. Some even brushed past their cheeks, the wind from their wings carrying a damp, musty scent, along with something powdery. Disgusted, Shushian snatched one of the passing shadows from the air. But the moment his fingers touched it, he clicked his tongue and flicked it away. Rubbing his fingertips, he felt an uncomfortably smooth residue, likely the powder from its wings. It's sort of a coliseum, right? We need more BL with an unexpected amount of bees. Shushian scowled, but before he could speak, Schwanman's cold voice cut in. Moths. Moths, indeed. We were close. We said butterflies. Now I'm just picturing some long-haired guys being chased by bees. That's kind of funny. Though the flames were quickly smothered by thousands of fluttering bodies, its brief glow revealed the space's layout. A wider cavern, its walls curved like an upturned melon. The arched walls were pocketed with holes and crevices, where myriad moths had hidden, lying in wait. Even in dragon form, Shushian loathed such pests. Not just moths, but anything that would wriggle, creep, or throng in swarms. Insane. The thought of them brushing past his face darkened his expression. The fire starter was engulfed by the writhing ball of moths. Then, with a sickening crackle, the smothered flame died, and the moths rained to the ground. Simultaneously, more wing beats erupted from the walls. What kind of cursed place is this, with this many pests? Shushian snapped. Step back. Schwanman produced another fire starter and his copper coins. Whoosh! A tiny flame sprung to life at the tip, illuminating his slender fingers. Boom! There came another deafening spat of fluttering as a dark tide of moths surged toward them. Schwanman swept a finger over the copper coins, then tapped the surface. A metallic hum resonated, and a fierce wind erupted from his sleeves. Hang on, I got it. Kind of. The tiny flame stretched and swelled into a fiery dragon that coiled through the cavern, incinerating the moths in its wake. A blazing dragon tangled around the swarm, and the cavern flickered between light and dark. Watching the rain of moth corpses, Shushan grimaced and turned away. His gaze fixed upon on the cavern walls, where the moth-infested crevices weren't natural but carved characters. I think that's a typo. His gaze fixed upon on the cavern walls, where the moth-infested crevices weren't natural but carved characters. I think they added extra word. Those are some freaky moths. Some demonic moths. Look at those fun skulls at the bottom, too. Yummy. I do love Shushan's face, though. He's like, nope. This is awful and disgusting. I hate this. Which, not gonna lie, that would probably be me in this situation. I do not like things flying at my face. It is a cool picture. Like, yeah, he definitely gives off cat vibes. There are carvings on the wall. He tugged at Xuanmin, tracing the characters downward until his fingers stopped at one cluster. Bai Chong Cave. He sucked in a breath. Where had he heard that before? Isn't this the place where the life-sharing spider was rumored to be? Chasing after someone had led them here. Somehow, they'd managed to fumble their way to their destination. It was too much of a coincidence. For a moment, Shushan felt a tremor of unease, but before it could solidify, he dismissed it. The wall carvings might as well have been gibberish. Aside from Baichong Cave, Shushan recognized nothing. The script must have been the creation of some ancient tribe. After futilely attempting to decipher it, he gave up and looked elsewhere. The dragon being a baby girl, right? This place is crawling with moths. Disgusting. Definitely not a place to linger. Xuanmin swatted at the falling insect corpses, his face twisted in revulsion. There's another passage ahead. Let's move. Anything's better than these powder-covered vermin. Xuanmin's gaze lingered on the carvings, but then he nodded. Without delaying further, he brushed aside the incoming moths with his sleeve and led Shushan toward the next passage. The fiery dragon wreaked havoc, charring every moth in its path. Xuanmin glanced backward. In no time at all, the ground had been carpeted with insect corpses. Nauseating sight. A closer look revealed something unusual. Ugh, those damn things bite. Xuanmin smacked the 2 bloody marks on his hand irritably. If not for his natural aversion to fire, he would have burned the entire cavern to the ground. Instead, he just waved his wounded hand at Xuanmin, unaware that his gesture was a little like a pouting child's. I love how disgusted Shushan looks and Xuanmin's really look. Yeah. Using the blazing dragon's light, Xuanmin examined the wounds, then pointed at the moth corpses. Some are abnormally large. If a mythical creature like the life-sharing spider could be bred here, Baichong Cave was no ordinary place. It seemed to act as a natural crucible for Gyu. As the moths lived here generation after generation, it was no surprise that they'd begun to mutate, and in horrifying ways. Not only had the mutations made the moths larger, they had also given them a craving for flesh. Yummy. Shushan strode ahead without a backward glance, his face stormy. Let's move. Take one more look at those things and I'll vomit on you. The further they went, the taller the passage became, allowing them to straighten up. Xuanmin's fiery dragon soared overhead at his command, lighting the way. Even Shushan found the blaze tolerable now that it kept the moths away. The 2 bloody wounds on Shushan's hand burned briefly before they faded. That's not ominous. The moths must have been venomous. Anyone else who had stumbled into the cave would have been driven mad by disgust, or have died in the cave covered in venomous bites. In any case, no kind fate would await them. Though most of the moths in the cavern had been incinerated, the passage still harbored some. As Xuanmin had said, they were far larger than normal. Some were even palm-sized. Their bloated abdomens suggested a diet of something substantial. Driven by instinct, most hurled themselves at the fiery dragon, but others were drawn to Shushan and Xuanmin. The further we go, the stranger these moths get, Shushan said with a scowl, sweeping his sleeve in annoyance. The resulting gale, sharp as knives, sliced into the attacking creatures and slammed them against the stone walls. The entire cave shook. Fine rock fragments showered down, creating a cloud of dust. Sometimes an excessive power wasn't a blessing. In a place on the verge of collapse, brute force was useless. Annoyed, Shushan consoled himself. At least the bald donkey is here. He knows how to rein himself in. Got another bald donkey! Alright, so our count is 80, 94. What do you think? Think we'll reach 100 tonight? I think it's very possible. So donkey count 94. Jiangxi Ning suffering is at a total of 5, 10, 15, 20, 24, and it is done because our boy is gone. So he suffered, but he is settled now. Our face count stands at 5, 10, 15, 16, and our wanted poster count stands at a crisp 10. By the 2 of them reached the passage's depths, the moths no longer mindlessly charged into the flames. Instead, they seemed almost intelligent. They avoided the pair of men and fled ahead as if they were trying to warn something else. Oh boy. Shushan couldn't shake the feeling that the moth's behavior carried an ominous implication. Yep, I agree. Lost in thought, he felt a sudden itch on his left pinky, like something tiny was crawling over it. He frowned and lifted his hand. Ants. A reddish ant perched on his finger, its head and antenna twitching, but it was much larger than a typical ant. Its exoskeleton gleamed red in the firelight. The audacious thing opened its jaws right in front of Shushan and bit a piece of flesh from his little finger. Psh, another blood-sucking, flesh-eating pest! Shushan irritably flicked the ant away. Naturally, there was plenty of force behind his little gesture, and the ant splattered against the cavern wall. Its innards emitted a foul-rotting stench as they oozed over the stone. The stench alone was enough to confirm its diet. It spent its days feeding on carcasses. Whether human or animal, well, that remained unclear. Before Shushan could recover from the putrid stench, he felt someone patting him on his sides and back. Turning, he saw Xuanmin draw back his hand. At his feet lay several upturned ants, and columns more marched toward them from ahead, scaling the uneven ground and jagged walls. The lines stretched from their feet to the edge of the firelight. These were far worse than the moths, for they would climb their legs. Shushan glanced at Xuanmin, whose expression had turned glacial. Xuanmin would never tolerate insects crawling under his clothes. Shushan peered into the darkness beyond the firelight, and his face grew grim. Ahead of them, the scattered ants had practically formed a carpet. The moment Shushan and Xuanmin paused, the lightning-fast ants rushed toward them in a rustling tide. It was as if they'd been collectively alerted, and they were practically at the pair's feet already. Again, he thought of the moths. Everything in this cave seemed on the verge of intelligence. They couldn't tread upon the ground, brush against the stone walls, or touch the ant-covered ceiling overhead. Without a second thought, Shushan summoned a gale beneath their feet, disregarding the risk of collapse, and yanked Xuanmin forward. Carried by the wind, they skimmed over the tide of man-eating ants. The gale roared, shaking the cavern. Rocks rained down from above as countless ants were crushed under the walls or torn apart in midair. Xuanmin's fiery dragon also continued its rampage, scorching the scaling black. Hello, Whisper Lady. How are you tonight? You haven't missed much. We just teleported from the corpse shop into a cavern. Had a cute little domestic moment. And then found mutated man-eating moths that Xuanmin is working on burning. Now they're encountering man-eating ants, and we are flying over them. But yeah, this is the cave where they think the spider, Baichong cave. So where the mind-altering spider is. So yeah. Super fun. But yeah. Now Shushan understood Old Man Chu's words. Just hearing the name, Baichong Cave, would be enough to scare the life out of them. Had they been ordinary humans, they'd have entered whole and left as skeletons. The cave seemed endless. After what felt like an hour of battling through with fire and wind, the ground was a graveyard. Moths, carnivorous ants, centipedes, millipedes, scorpions. Shushan tallied the venomous pests they'd slain and sneered at the carnage. Yeah, I would have turned around at the centipedes. Forget the millipedes. Scorpions are whatever. The centipedes and millipedes, I hate centipedes. I hate them. Too many legs, and they look fuzzy, and they're so fast, and I hate them. Ugh. We sometimes get house centipedes, and it's awful. Each had been deadlier than the last, larger and harder to kill. Some had even required prolonged burning before they succumbed. Nonetheless, troublesome as they were more mere nuisances to Shushan and Xuanmin. The real reason for Shushan's sneering lay elsewhere. The further in they ventured, the more the piles on the ground no longer consisted of only the insect carcasses he and Xuanmin slaughtered. Mixed in with these mountains of insect remains were an ever-increasing number of human bones. The bare bones were yellowish white, their skin and flesh having been devoured so thoroughly that not a scrap remained. At first, they looked as if they had lain there for ages. However, a closer inspection revealed damp blood still adhering to the bones, along with a lingering, familiar smell. They'd reached the end of the sea of insect corpses. Shushan covered his nose. The ones from the corpse shop. Schwanman frowned, scanning the area before focusing ahead. They were at the passage's end. A solid wall stood in front of them, and a spiraling stone staircase with narrow, cobweb-draped steps lay at their feet. The webs, once layered on thick, had been brushed aside and now hung at the sides. The sight of webs brought the life-sharing spider to mind. That's its name. This couldn't have been coincidence. The stairs likely led to their destination. That's too many ants. F it, we're gonna fly. Shushan. Someone beat us here. Shushan eyed the webs. The ones in the corpse shop were just meat shields. But there aren't enough bones here. Some must remain. Probably there. Shushan pointed upward. They glanced at each other and set off to climb the stone staircase. The staircase, too, was smeared with tacky blood along with other filth and grime. Both of them hovered with their feet off the ground, which had the fortunate side effect of preventing any noises. These stairs were long and twisting and winding, with what must have been over 100 steps. Still, a few moments were all they needed to silently land at the top. There, a flat stone chamber opened up, perhaps twice the size of a regular room. At the chamber's center was a deep black pool. A bronze mirror rested beside it. Large, haphazard swaths of blood extended from the wall all the way to the stones lining the pool's edge. One of the white stones bore 5 bloody streaks, as if someone had clawed desperately at it. There's nobody here. They sure ran fast. Shushan scanned the chamber by the firelight until his gaze settled on the white stone, or sank to the bottom. The chamber's squared edges marked it as man-made. Aside from the pool and a few supporting pillars, a stone platform at the far end resembled a bed. A very hard, very cold bed. Hardly comfortable. Someone was cultivating here, Schwanman remarked as they entered, his eyes on the bed. Now that we're talking about all the bugs, like I'm getting like the phantom things crawling on you sensation. Ugh. Shushan jerked a thumb backward. What kind of nut job would choose a place like this? Despite the lack of swarming pests here, the mountain of corpses below was not conducive to meditation. Yet signs of habitation were undeniable. There was the platform and also alcoves carved into the walls at arm level. Schwanman touched one, then wiped his fingers with a look of disgust before casting a cleansing charm. What? Shushan eyed the alcoves and Schwanman's finger. Lamp oil. Shushan initially assumed Schwanman's disgust was based on the greasiness, but then it hit him. Some lamp oils had inhumane origins. Oh, he said in understanding. Despite Schwanman's revulsion, he cleaned the oil from his fingers, then swept the alcoves with the fiery dragon, lighting the wall-mounted lamps in a series of hisses before dismissing the flames. As the dragon vanished and he rehooked the coins over his fingers, he glanced over at Shushan and the sweat beading his temples. Relieved of the heat and pests, Shushan relaxed. He paced the chamber with his arms crossed. Aside from those finger-sized air holes, there's no exit. He stopped by the dark pool, nudging the blood-stained white stone. So where'd the survivors go? Did they all drown themselves? The pool was barely 30 feet wide, hardly room for several bodies, and the bloody fingerprints suggested a struggle. Whether from infighting or another threat, if there had been a fight, there must have been victors and victims. The losers drowning was understandable, but what about the winners? And where's the so-called life-sharing spider? Shushan muttered. According to Old Man Chu, the legendary divine medicine was here. The cave lived up to its name, but they'd reached the end without seeing a single spider. During his pacing, Shushan had checked every crack and crevice. Nothing. Perhaps this holds the answer. Have they looked up? Like, that is my question. Like, you've checked every crack and crevice. Have you looked up? Because I feel like this is a Shelob from Lord of the Rings sort of situation. Maybe that's just me. Perhaps this holds the answer. Xuanmin was by the stone bed, examining the dark cave wall. Like the moth-infested cavern earlier, this one bore inscriptions that covered the wall from top to bottom. Shushan had tried reading the ones in the other room, but all he'd gotten out of it was a headache. To him, it was a bunch of incomprehensible scribbles, without a single recognizable character. He had no idea how Xuanmin had the patience to stand there staring at them for so long. Just looking at those characters made Shushan's head throb, so he stopped bothering with Xuanmin. Instead, Shushan squatted down by the black pool, wondering if he should just drain the entire thing. He studied it, but found its depths unfathomable. From his vantage point, all he could see was a stretch of inky darkness. What might lie inside remained hidden. I will give the author credit for coming up with the absolute freakiest arrays. I mean, they do have that touch, yes. What was he even going to do with the water? He glanced around. There was no chance he'd suck it up again. Doing it at Fentu Island was disgusting enough. This time, I'll really fill the room with vomit. His gaze fell on the bronze mirror lying near his feet. Judging from its bloodied rim, it must have been left behind by whoever had come here before. Or perhaps they hadn't had the chance to take it. Shushan reached out, wanting to pick it up for a closer look, but when his fingers brushed its edge, he felt the mirror vibrate. Its metal edge clinked against the stone floor, and a faint gurgle emanated from the black pool as if someone had tossed a pebble in, disturbing its still surface. Xuanmin turned at the sound, eyeing the mirror by Shushan's hand and the rippling black waters. Then he walked over and joined Shushan in his crouch. There's something strange about this thing. Take a look. Shushan nudged it toward Xuanmin. Xuanmin frowned and moved to pick up the mirror for a closer look. However, his fingers brushing against it caused another sound, much clearer than before. The mirror's response was much greater than it had been for Shushan. The ripples suddenly quickened, and the whole pool seemed to come to life. Probably the same nutjob who turned a cave into a gew jar. Use vases or regular jars, you nut. Yeah. The whole pool seemed to come to life. Circle after circle radiated outward with alarming speed. Xuanmin instinctively tried to toss the mirror away, but it seemed stuck to his fingers, and he was unable to remove his hand. Moments later, Tai Jidu symbols emerged from the mess of blood stains surrounding the bronze mirror. Tai Jidu? Tai Jidu. What is Tai Jidu? I know what a Tai Jitsu is, but Tai Jidu. Come on. It is being very slow. I mean, I'm guessing it might be just a language or an inscription, but it's still loading. Come on. Taijidu. Oh! The Chaijidu, also known as the yin-yang symbol, is an ancient Chinese symbol that represents the balance of opposing forces in the universe. It's a fundamental concept in Chinese philosophy, particularly associated with Taoism. It was later adopted by Confucian and Buddhist thought. The symbol depicts a circle divided by two swirling teardrop-shaped halves, one black and one white, that interlock head to tail. Like, literally the... Yeah. Okay. Taijidu symbols emerge from the mess of blood stains surrounding the bronze mirror. Shushian watched Xuanmin's fingers twitch upon the mirror, then his entire body seemed to freeze over. The only thing that moved were his eyes, which focused vacantly on the dark pool. A droning sound buzzed in Shushian's head. It was as if someone had cracked a whip across his mind, stunning him. Yeah, no, that was pretty cool to learn about. His entire body seemed to freeze over. The only thing that moved were his eyes, which focused vacantly on the dark pool. A droning sound buzzed in Shushian's head. It was as if someone had cracked a whip across his mind, stunning him. For a long moment, he was trapped in a stupor. When some of Shushian's awareness returned and he could turn his head, he realized the black pool was no longer a void of darkness, but had become like a mirror itself. Upon its dark surface, a scene gradually emerged. The scene was dreamlike in its haziness, yet it made Shushian's heart skip. He found himself drawn in, bewitched. He seemed to be standing among mountains and rivers. Wind howled fiercely in his ears. Behind him, the mountains rumbled and shook, while towering waves charged toward the sky like a stampede of white horses. Countless terrified screams and wailing cries filled the air, shredded by the raging wind and crashing waves. Beneath the sky engulfing waves, amid the collapsing rocks, knelt two figures. Though everything was shrouded in a layer of mist, Shushian recognized them easily. Xuanmin and himself. He saw himself motionless, hands limp at his sides like a statue. His soaked black robes clung to him, while his wet hair stuck like a drowned man's to his pallid neck. It was a gloomy scene. Above that, his eyes were covered by a hand. The hand had long, slender fingers. It should have been beautiful, but it was also too pale, almost a lifeless gray. It was Xuanmin's hand. Xuanmin raised his head, but his downcast eyes were hidden in shadow and veiled by a thin haze, rendering his emotions unreadable. Their poses were deeply suggestive, as if they had just kissed. However, Shushian failed to notice this through the water and mist. Xuanmin burst into a long spate of heavy coughs. One of his hands remained on Shushian's eyes, but the other hand dangled at his side as his coughs grew duller, more muffled. His once pristine white monk robes were stained deep red. Blood spread in dark pools across his chest and waist. There seemed no end to the blood, as it slowly soaked his entire robe. Xuanmin's hand over Shushian's eyes weakened and nearly slipped away. The Shushian, watching from a distance, felt a chill course through him, and a cold sweat broke out all over his body. His lashes trembled before he jolted awake, tearing himself free from the misty vision. Gradually, the buzzing in Shushian's ears subsided, and the sound of heavy, rapid breathing trickled into his ears. As though he had been roused from a nightmare, he realized the frantic breaths were his own. His vision now clear, he saw the black pool rippling quietly. The scene on the surface had vanished without a trace. In front of him, Xuan Min was unharmed. His fingers were no longer a lifeless gray, nor were his robes drenched in blood. Instead, he sat with his profile turned toward Shushan, staring at the black pool. He, too, seemed immersed in some kind of scene. Shushan couldn't tell whether he'd witnessed the same vision or something else, but a rare trace of emotion flickered in his expression. Most wouldn't have grasped what he was feeling, but they'd have found themselves filled with an inexplicable sorrow, nonetheless, as they watched him. Shushan studied Xuanmin's face in silence, then frowned and pressed a hand to his own chest. He released a slow breath before he reached out and tentatively patted Xuanmin. "Bald donkey," Shushan's voice was hoarse. "Bald donkey, wake up." Nothing. Shushan frowned. His hand slid from Xuanmin's shoulder to the back of the other man's hand and closed around his fingers. At this, Xuanmin's fingers finally released the mirror and left it on the ground. His hand gripped Shushan's in return. Was he seeking relief from pain? Wrestling with some unshakable emotion? Xuanmin clutched Shushan so fiercely that pain radiated through the bones of his fingers. Shushan didn't pull back, but lifted his eyes just in time to see Xuanmin turn his face. His eyes still a little blank, his brow knitted. His unfocused eyes swept over Shushan's face. He pressed his lips together and closed his eyes. After a long pause, he opened them once again, slowly. "Awake now?" Shushan asked quietly. Xuanmin's long stare was deep and inscrutable, whatever lurked there too tangled to read. Finally, he looked away and released Shushan's fingers. He murmured. With a sweep of his wide sleeve, the bronze mirror was sent skittering into a corner. Shushan pulled back his hand. That pool, just now it... The mirror and pool formed an array, but the blood masked it. We overlooked it. Xuanmin's voice was calm. It seemed he'd recovered. What array? Another inner demon? Xuanmin shook his head. It shows your death, he said, sounding remarkably composed. Shushan's breath hitched. Death? But the array shouldn't affect divine creatures like dragons. Xuanmin said, his brow furrowed. What did you see? Shushan's mind was a sea of blankness. Xuanmin's words confirmed that he had seen an illusion. If the array had no effect on him, what he'd seen must have been a hallucination. Just a fragmented dream. Or so he told himself. Xuanmin was still frowning, waiting for an answer, so Shushan waved a hand. I didn't see a thing. The pool just started rippling, and you stopped responding, so I asked. Truly? Xuanmin was quiet. Even lightning from the heavens can't kill me. How would I die? Shushan scoffed. Xuanmin looked into his eyes, but found no opening there. He hummed and went silent, as if accepting Shushan's words. However, he added, be cautious in the future, regardless. What about you? What did you see? Shushan asked, ignoring the warning. Xuanmin got up, but he didn't lift his eyes. Nothing. A peaceful death in old age. We have reached the next chapter. I need to blow my nose again. Must be dusty down here. Is my thing on? No, it is not. That's why I'm so sniffly. Must have been a power surge that turned off my air filter. I'll do it. We had some crazy storms yesterday and this morning. All right. 125. Chapter 34, Mother and Child Spider. Xuanmin casually brushed the dust from his sleeves. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss, but a subtle disquiet remained in Shushian's heart. Everything in the illusion had been veiled in mist except for the vivid image of Xuanmin covered in blood. It was like a sharp thorn jabbing into his flesh, impossible to ignore. The mere thought of the vision tugged on the spike and aggravated the surrounding flesh. He was deeply unsettled. But he pushed the thought away. After all, he had a long lifespan. If Xuanmin found himself in trouble, Shushian could always lend a hand. The idea that had surfaced in the morning light of Mount Lianjiang stirred restlessly in Shushian's mind once more, though this time it was more than a fleeting impulse. And if it wasn't just a whim, he needed to be deliberate, telling Xuanmin. Now was not the place to bring it up, considering their blood-soaked surroundings and the unfinished business still at hand. Shushian would wait until they found the life-sharing spider and left this horrible cave. No sooner had the thought crossed his mind that he felt something shift near his feet, accompanied by a faint rustling sound. Had some surviving insect crawled up the stone steps? Shushian didn't see anything crawling there, and the faint sound ceased, as though aware that he was searching for its source. We are currently at 96. Sorry, I didn't announce where we were. We're at 96. I did mark down the 2 donkey counts that came up. Yes. So close. 4 more. As I put up the number 3. 4 more. Oh, man. Shushian peered down the steps with a displeased face until something occurred to him. With the way we're burning things, we should have seen at least a few stragglers escape. There were thousands of insects below us, so how come none made it up here? Centipedes and millipedes might struggle to climb so many steps, but what about moths and winged ants? Why haven't any flown up yet? Xuanmin was studying the strange characters on the wall, focused as his eyes traced each symbol like he actually understood them. Without turning, he replied, "Perhaps they dare not come up." The guess aligned with Shushian's own thoughts. The upper chamber wasn't sealed off by a barrier or a door, yet it stood in stark contrast from the lower tunnel. One was a sea of insects, while the other was devoid of a single antenna. The only explanation was that the insects feared this place. Even without a physical barrier, they refused to cross the boundary. Recalling the traces of spiderwebs on the steps, Shushian imagined what the insects were afraid of, and the source of the movement near his feet became clear. Perhaps due to Shushian's lack of movement, the creature at his feet grew bolder, throwing away its caution. The rustling it emitted would have been imperceptible to anyone without Shushian's keen hearing. Resting his elbow on his knee, he listened for a few seconds, pinpointed the origin of the sound, then casually pressed finger down. He didn't use much force. If this really was the thing they were looking for, his full strength could crush its carapace. Beneath his fingertip was a small, round, bead-like object. It was smooth and fragile, as if the slightest pressure would shatter it. Shushan recalled the sound of rolling beads he'd heard after escaping the inner demon beneath the bamboo house. His eyes gleamed, and the corner of his lips twitched upward. I've caught something interesting. Shushan rarely encountered genuine threats to his life, or in his life, so his vigilance was minimal compared to an ordinary mortal's. Poisons didn't affect him much, and few creatures could harm him, so he often acted without thinking. As the saying went, if you play with fire, you'll get burned. No sooner had Shushan announced his catch than the creature beneath his fingers retaliated. Shushan felt a sharp prick on his fingertip, followed by the distinct sensation of his blood being drawn. Simultaneously, the fragile bead began to swell, growing a full size larger with just one sip. Then some kind of liquid is injected back into his flesh through the same puncture. Had it not been a rare and fragile creature, Shushan would have killed it the moment it bit him. Given its value, he could only roll his eyes and lift it from the ground, his face icy. When Xuan Min turned, he saw Shushan wrestling with something in his hand. What did you catch? A spider? Yeah. Shushan struggled to transfer the slippery bead from his fingers to his palm, gripping it tightly to prevent its escape. Once he had managed to do so, he scrutinized it beneath the firelight. The thing in his hand was a spider, complete with head, abdomen, 8 legs, and a row of bristle-like spines along its side. Its colors and markings blended seamlessly with the stone floor. When it was motionless, most people would not have been able to spot it, even if they stared their eyes out. Now that it was in Shushian's palm, its camouflage began to fade in color. Within seconds, it had become a perfect match with Shushian's hand. A deception so masterful, it was awe-inspiring. Oh, so it's got chameleon camouflaging. Very cool. Xuanmin has asked his question casually, not expecting that Shushian had actually found something. Startled, he strode over. It really is a spider. Be careful, don't let it... Before he could finish his sentence, he noticed that the finger Shushian had used to pin the spider had already turned to bluish black. The discoloration was creeping up his wrist. The sight was grotesque. His hand resembled a charred chicken claw soaked in vegetable juice. Ew. Resigned, Shushian lifted his face to Xuanmin's approach. Shushian's expression declared his blamelessness. Bit late for the warning, he said with a dry chuckle. Xuanmin said nothing, and Shushian sucked in a breath. Xuanmin frowned and reached out as if to take the venomous spider. Does it hurt? Not exactly. Shushian's expression was a mix of amusement and frustration. He wriggled his ring and pinky fingers, evading Xuanmin's grasp. This thing's too slippery. No point taking it now, it's already bitten me. But do me a favor. My hand's itching like mad, and I can't scratch it. Help me out. Hurry up. Itchiness was the worst torture, far more unbearable than pain. The accursed spider's venom was potent indeed. A mere drop injected into Shushian's fingertip had turned his entire arm green. The discoloration was creeping toward his shoulder and neck. If it reached his face, that would be quite the memorable sight. A maddening itch radiated through his veins, leaving him restless. Anyone with less endurance might have been rolling on the ground in tears by now. Longing for death seemed inevitable. Shushian's brow knit as he began to sway on his feet. His eyes burned with strain, then misted over with unshed tears. He took a step toward Xuanmin, wanting to tell him to hurry up, but when his foot touched the ground, he buckled. At the sight of Shushian staggering forward, Xuanmin swept him up and carried him to the stone platform. He tried to pry the spider loose, but Shushian's grip was unyielding, trapping it firmly in his palm. With his back to the wall, Shushan slumped to his side, barely upright. Hurry and scratch it! My hand! Dragon's blood had the power to neutralize toxins, meaning most of them were ineffective on Shushan. At most, a bite might lead to brief swelling or discoloration, but it would vanish almost immediately. The spider's venom, however, was exceptionally potent. Shushan struggled to endure it, so it was hard to imagine how anyone else might fare. But Xuanmin couldn't afford to carelessly scratch Shushan as requested because some venom only worsened when agitated. While the discoloration crawled up to Shushan's shoulder, Xuanmin brought out 2 paper talismans. After slicing into his finger, he inscribed several marks with fluid strokes, then pressed the bloodied talisman to Shushan's neck. The advancing greens and blacks immediately stopped upon touching it. Xuanmin pressed the second talisman onto the back of the blackened claw that Shushan's hand had become. Holding Shushan's chin, he tilted the latter's face to the left and stretched his neck taut. Xuanmin pulled open Shushan's collar and placed his fingers in the hollow of his exposed neck. After a brief measurement, Xuanmin pressed his thumb just below Shushan's collarbone, unsealed the coin, and traced its edge while channeling energy into his skin. His head still cocked to the side, Shushan gave a soft exhale. The energy flowed like a cooling stream through his meridians to spread throughout his body, soothing the fiery itch left by the venom. Half the torment vanished at once, while the rest was neutralized by his dragon blood and receded bit by bit. Shushan rubbed his still tingling hand against Xuanmin's before withdrawing it. Then he jutted his chin in the direction of the wall. You've been staring at that for a while. Figure anything out. Is this thing in my hand the legendary life-sharing spider? Now that he had been bitten, he'd learned his lesson. He adjusted his grip to show Xuanmin the spider. It had transformed yet again. Though it was still the same color as his palm, a crimson line now streaked its round abdomen. Xuanmin's expression was grave. It drank your blood. It bit me, helped itself to some blood, then kindly offered me some venom in return. So considerate, he said dryly, rubbing his arm. Xuanmin said nothing to that. Shushan gestured toward the characters on the wall with his chin. Does that text really mention the life-sharing spider? What does it say? Where did this thing come from? Why couldn't we find it earlier? And what does this red line mean? That we've shared our lifespan somehow? Having fired off several questions in succession, he paused before adding one more that had been lingering in his mind. They're really obscure, those characters. In all my years, I've never seen anything like them. How were you able to read them? Xuanmin was taken aback. You've never seen them before? What, really? Is it actually some common script? I swear I've never seen it. Perhaps someone created it themselves. How do I describe it? It just feels too archaic and rudimentary. Xuanmin's face grew drawn as he tried to recall something. After a moment, he looked up at the characters again. I can understand them. It feels like I learned them when I was young, but I can't remember who taught me. Someone taught him? Shushan recalled the moment he'd glimpsed in Xuanmin's memories. Xuanmin's vantage point had been low to the ground, and the details had been vague and blurred. All he could make out had been the white robes of another figure almost brushing the floor. And Xuanmin had said something, just 2 or 3 words, like some kind of address. Now that Shushan thought about it, perhaps it had been his master? For a moment, Shushan found it strange. Xuanmin's usual demeanor and habits didn't suggest someone with many personal connections. Living alone in a mist-shrouded bamboo pagoda suited him far better. At times, Xuanmin seemed more like a being born of nature, utterly detached from the mortal world, even more so than Xuxian. Yet Xuanmin had once been a small child who'd grown into the man he was today. He'd had parents, teachers, perhaps even disciples, like the child in those fragmented memories who'd asked who Xuanmin was. The thought of these ties made Xuxian aware that the Xuanmin he knew was just one facet of the man. As for the rest, well, perhaps even Xuanmin himself didn't know about them. Xuxian fell silent for a long while. When he returned to the present, he found Xuanmin watching him. "I wouldn't lie to you," Xuanmin said quietly, his dark eyes steady. It seemed he'd misinterpreted Xuxian's sudden quiet. Xuxian stared, then relaxed and waved his hand. "I just remembered something. I'm not accusing you of deception. Monks do not speak falsehoods. I know." With that, he lazily winked at him. Xuanmin blinked. "Speaking of which, I should come clean about something." Xuxian straightened his collar and his spine. "Those copper coins of yours might be a bit rebellious," he said awkwardly. "Rebellious?" Xuanmin glanced at the string of coins hanging from his fingers. "After I used it a few times to heal my bones, some strange side effects began to appear." Saying this, Xuxian inexplicably felt a pang of guilt, but then he reminded himself it wasn't something he could control. Why the hell should he feel guilty? He paused, shook off the guilt, and said with utmost seriousness, "It may be that the coin's powers are still hanging around inside me, resulting in a sort of connection between us. Certain emotions and reactions of yours end up leading over to me, just like when the dragon saliva. You know, something like that." It is so sad that Xuanmin has no memories. His words started off smooth, but started to stumble as he went on. By the final sentence, Xuxian's tongue was tripping over itself, and he scratched at his cheek as he mumbled his way to the end. Xuanmin stayed quiet. "Well, that part's not a big deal. The important part is, when the seals were last lifted and you regained some memories, I saw some of them too." Xuxian glanced at Xuanmin's expression and quickly added, "Not much, though. Just a few fragments here and there. Didn't even catch a full sentence, and it was all hazy, like looking through fog." As he spoke, his hand, which had been scratching his cheek, came to a stop. He pointed at the string of coins in Xuanmin's hand and declared righteously, "Blame that." If Xuxian was a cat, he'd be furiously washing his face. I can see that, Truffle. Yes, yes, he would. Xuanmin's lips parted slightly like he wanted to ask something, but he remained silent. His gaze held no anger or any unpleasant emotions. In the end, he shook his head. "It's fine." Then, in a calm tone, he repeated, "I wouldn't lie to you. If you saw something, then you saw it." His lack of guardedness made Xuxian's heart squeeze, but their connection was still an inappropriate one, so he told Xuanmin, "I trust you, but if you have a way to sever this link, you should." "We'll discuss it after we leave," Xuanmin said readily. His face betrayed no hint of apprehension. He tapped the characters on the stone wall. "According to this, two types of venomous spiders were raised here. The insects in the lower caverns were meant as their food. With the help of the talisman array, each generation was nurtured for 49 years. This was originally done at someone's request, but the requester had passed by the time they matured, so the spiders were sealed here. 49 years per generation. When did they start? Who knows how many generations have been bred by now? Shushan frowned, unsure whether this was good or bad. Based on the reasoning in the writing, at least, the person who'd bred the spiders here didn't seem outright evil. What else does it say? Schwanman pointed to the third line. The spiders are confined within this array. Know not death and see no life. They literally broke up the sentence, so it's the spiders are confined within this array. Space. Dot. Know not death and see no life. All that text and that's it, Shushan said, perplexed. That's the only line related to the life-sharing spider, Schwanman explained patiently. That was good enough. The text looked long and rambling, and Shushan wouldn't have had the patience to listen to the whole thing. Still, that's not a great hobby. The spider breeder should take up bonsai. Definitely be more peaceful. And if they're waiting 49 years to do it, they'd have a great bonsai tree by the end of that. The text looked long and rambling, and Shushan wouldn't have had the patience to listen to the whole thing. He was fine with getting the key points, so he nodded and didn't press. His fingers, lazily propped on the edge of the stone platform, tapped twice. It makes sense, he mused. That bronze mirror. Shushan pointed to the mirror in the corner. Didn't you just say the spiders are confined within this array? Know not death and see no life. Earlier, we searched this place and found no trace of life, because the spiders were trapped in the array. Only by witnessing death through the mirror could we see life. Otherwise, why would those who came before us set up such an array here? They must have used the feeling of near death to draw the spiders out. Schwanman glanced at the mirror and nodded. Then he skipped past a few columns and pointed to a later line. This one explains how the life-sharing spider works. What? Schwanman glanced at Shushan's bitten finger in resignation and read, Life-sharing spiders exist as a mother-child pair. The child works in tandem with the mother, and the effects are achieved by blood. When the child spider takes blood from a host, a line of blood appears on its belly. If the paired mother spider then takes blood from another, that person shares the first host's lifespan. Shushan immediately stood up from the stone platform, eyes wide as he scanned the area. Where's that mother spider? The child spider had already taken a sip of his blood. If the mother spider bit anyone else, that person would gain a dragon's lifespan. If they didn't find the creature now and let it lurk in some corner until they left, the consequences would be catastrophic if someone else stumbled upon it later. If the other person in question was benevolent, giving them a long life might not have been a problem. But what if someone wicked got their hands on it? Wouldn't that give birth to a real 1,000-year scourge? No, even if the mother spider bit a saintly person, it still wouldn't have been a good thing. Not everyone could endure a near endless lifespan. The weight of eternity was far beyond what ordinary mortals could bear. The mother and child are linked, said Schwanman. Since the child spider is in your hand, she shouldn't be far. At that, Shushan pressed a finger to his lips, telling Schwanmin to stay quiet. Then he gathered up his robes and crouched, listening intently. With their delicate spindly legs, the spiders were nearly soundless when moving. Someone with extraordinary hearing could only just manage to detect them. After holding his breath for a moment, Shushan suddenly looked up and gestured toward Schwanman's feet. The spider was highly sensitive to human movement. If Shushan stood up to chase it now, it would scurry away again. He blinked pointedly at Schwanmin, signaling for him to catch it. Fortunately, Xuan Min was no ordinary person either. Upon getting Shushan's message, he silently moved his robes aside and bent his knees until his hand hovered just above the ground. He lightly brushed over the area around himself. Finally, his fingers paused near a crevice in the wall, and he had to turn a bit to the side. From Shushan's angle, only his shoulders and back were visible. Peering over, Shushan saw Xuanmin carefully cupping his hand over the space, his movements cautious to avoid being bitten. There was a tense pause, then Xuanmin's sleeve swayed as he finally stood up. It seemed he was worried the spider might bite Shushan again. He kept it firmly enclosed in his palm. "There's a small porcelain vial in my pouch." Shushan blinked before realizing what the monk was getting at. "Ah," he said, stepping closer. The child spider was securely pinched between his left fingers, while his right hand hovered in front of Xuanmin's waist. Shushan hesitantly reached into the hidden pouch there. "Uh, Not the one at my waist." "Say that earlier, won't you?" Shushan bit his tongue and sheepishly withdrew his hand. Instead, he slipped it into the front of Xuanmin's robes. For a fleeting instant, he missed his old self, the one who could rummage through Xuanmin's pockets for coins or needles without batting an eye. Now that his thoughts were no longer pure, even the simple act of reaching into Xuanmin's robes was charged. If not for Xuanmin's unwavering focus on the spider in his hand, his expression solemn, Shushan's thoughts would have already strayed into dangerous territory. "Found it," Shushan said with forced composure, withdrawing his hand. In his palm lay two tiny, exquisite porcelain vials. Each was no longer larger than his thumb, round-bellied and flat, just enough to fit fine powders or medicine. Now they were also the perfect tools for this task. He popped open the stopper of one, and Xuanmin deftly plucked something from his palm and dropped it inside. Once that hand was free, Shushan passed him the other vial and examined the first. We have been blessed. I love how this artist draws them being embarrassed and everything. Look at that cute blush in his face. Oh, the little star bouncing off his face. We literally get to see his gay panic. Inside, a round spider skittered around, its color gradually fading to nearly match the white porcelain. At first glance, it looked identical to the child spider that had bitten Shushan, except for a thin line of blood atop its head that mirrored the child spider's mark. Shushan having a mini tantrum. Without further thought, Shushan stuffed the child spider in as well, sealed the vial, and tucked it away. As he did, he caught Xuanmin corking the other vial from the corner of his eye. The blushes are great. I love them. Shushan hesitated in confusion. Had Xuanmin's vial even been opened? It didn't seem like it, but when he looked again, Xuanmin had returned the vial to his robes and was studying the characters on the wall, his brow slightly lined. "What's wrong?" Shushan asked, setting aside the mystery of that vial. He tilted his chin toward the wall. "Why that look? Is there a problem?" Xuanmin tapped the end of the inscription with a curled finger. "The name signed here." "There's a signature?" Shushan asked curiously. "What about it?" "It feels familiar," Xuanmin replied. "Oh? What's the name?" Xuanmin paused. "Tong Deng." Tong Dang. Tong Dang. Upon hearing the name, Shushan also froze for a moment. An inexplicable sense of déjà vu rose in his chest, like he too had heard the name somewhere before. That made no sense. If he really had, he wouldn't be drawing a complete blank. Do we remember what those banners said that the Council of Sacrifice said? My goodness, what is their name? Court of Imperial Sacrifices. This humble monk goes by the Dharma name Tong Dang. I've come to take you to the Court of Imperial Sacrifices. So, the plot thickens. Is this our Tong Dang? Or is this the other mysterious Tong Dang? This made no sense. If he really had, he wouldn't be drawing a complete blank. Shushian's memory wasn't poor, but he'd lived too long, and most people and events had passed through his life without leaving a mark. Even so, anyone he'd exchanged more than a few words with would stick in his mind for a long time. If something felt familiar, he could usually pinpoint why. Yes, Tong Dang is the court's boss. The state preceptor is named Tong Dang. This time it was as if everything he wanted to recall was shrouded in fog, always just out of reach, impossible to grasp. It took some time, but Shushan realized that it wasn't the characters that would have made up Tong Dang that felt familiar, but the sound of the name. Where have I heard it before? He nudged Xuanmin. You really have no recollection at all? The memories I've recovered don't include that name. Of course the critical parts are missing, Shushan grumbled. He crossed his arms and absently rubbed his chin with his thumb and forefinger as he scrutinized the archaic characters. Those who invent their own scripts are usually from remote clans who keep away from the mortal world. Since this life-sharing spider resembles a Gyu, the clan likely practices some form of witchcraft, maybe from the southern borders. Not to mention Old Man Chu's earlier claim that the legend had been passed down from his ancestors. For something to be considered ancestral, it had to date back at least 200 years. 200 years ago, the southern borders. A name that felt vaguely familiar to both of them. Who could it be? Shushian's thoughts drifted further and further. He mentally flipped through everyone he remembered, even a little from 2 centuries ago, but he came up completely empty. The conditions had zero overlap. He couldn't unearth a single person who fit all 3 criteria. If even this yielded no clues, then he might have misjudged some key detail. Since no immediate answers were forthcoming, Shushian gestured with one arm, brushing the matter aside for now. But then his fingers twitched and he paused. He looked at his ring finger and inspected it for a long moment. What? Did you think of a lead? Xuanmin pressed, assuming that was the case. Instead, Shushian thrust his ring finger in front of Xuanmin's face. Look, a new mole. He jabbed it so close that Xuanmin had to lean back to study it. At the tip of his otherwise flawless finger was a tiny red dot. From the spider bite? Shushian bit his tongue, squinting as he examined it. He jerked his chin toward Xuanmin's neck, rather like the one under your jaw near your throat. I wonder if it'll also sprout spider legs like yours from time to time. That shouldn't happen yet. The mother spider hasn't bitten anyone. As long as the mother spider hadn't taken a bite, the so-called life-sharing bond remained solely between Shushan and the spiders. No secondary link had been established. Shushan rubbed the finger with the new red mark and narrowed his eyes. What if I killed both spiders right now? They won't die. Xuanmin tapped the wall again. Until they bite someone, their lifespan is tied to yours. As long as you live, they will too. Two measly little spiders, and he couldn't do anything to them? Shushan was so infuriated he almost toppled over. I keep thinking of the spider demon family from Demon Slayer. It's kind of funny, Annika. So I just have to take care of them forever now, he said icily. Aren't they special? Spiders that'll live for thousands of millennia. Maybe they'll even become geniuses after weathering a heavenly tribulation with me. Instead of rings, why not spiders? So romantic. Xuanmin shook his head at a loss for words. Does the inscription at least say how to break this? Shushan demanded. That was the whole point of coming here. It does. Shushan's expression instantly brightened in the firelight like jade washed with water. Really? Let's hear it. It doesn't matter how troublesome it is, as long as it removes that thing on your neck. When the recipient of the life-sharing dies, the bond breaks, said Xuanmin succinctly. Shushan blinked. This is bullshit. Seriously, what kind of stupid and irresponsible bullshit is this? It was like digging a pit and just leaving it without filling it in. Shushan glared at the sprawling inscription with fury, especially the signature at the end, as if by staring at the name hard enough, his glare could pierce through time and space to reach the person responsible for raising the life-sharing spiders. He felt a twinge of regret at not being able to read the writing himself. If he could, he would have combed through every character to make sure nothing about the life-sharing spiders slipped by unnoticed. Still, he trusted that the meticulous Xuanmin had studied it even more thoroughly. He would never miss a possible solution, especially when the outcome was so closely tied to his own life. Shushan felt like this entire trip had been a double loss. Not only had they failed to break Xuanmin's curse, but he'd also ended up shackling his own lifespan to the damn spiders. Enough, Shushan muttered. If there's no solution here, staying any longer is a waste of time. At least I've got the pair of spiders. We may find another way to deal with them later. For now, the matter of the life-sharing spider had to be set aside. But the person who had arrived before them and left in a hurry, that was a lead worth following. He ran through the clues in his mind. The peachwood pendant he'd torn off, the walking corpses, and now the array set up with the bronze mirror at the black pool. Shushan was certain they all pointed back to the same sorcerer. Back when Lu Shiju had performed the divination for them, his results had indicated the sorcerer was still secluded within a Mount Penlong cave in Shu. Had he really managed to rush all the way here? What could have prompted him to hurry from Shu to Langshou? No amount of thinking would unveil the answer. Better just chase the man down and interrogate him directly. I have a theory. I think that Xuanmin is the one that was bit by the baby spider. I think the fake state preceptor that is in seclusion right now is the one that got bit by the mother spider, and that's the person that is the sorcerer. I think there's something up with Xuanmin, like where he's like an ageless being or cultivated to immortality already. And so the other fake state preceptor was like, "Give me some of that," and caused something with the memory loss. That's just my prediction. I don't know if that's actually how it is, but that's where, like, this stuff is leading me. No amount of thinking would unveil the answer. Better to just chase the man down and interrogate him directly. Fortunately, if there was one thing Shushan excelled at, it was speed. Even if the sorcerer had a head start, catching up would be child's play. He couldn't have gone far, Shushan said, standing once more at the edge of the black pool and studying the mess of bloodstains. Hmm. Xuanmin left the inscriptions and walked over, following Shushan's gaze to the ground. Look. Shushan pointed at a few distinct handprints. The bloodstains are too messy. It looks like there was a struggle, which is why we thought that at first. But all the blood is confined to one area, and these handprints belong to the same person. So, he probably set up the array, lured out a pair of life sharing spiders, got bitten, and in his agony did this to himself. If even dragon blood couldn't instantly neutralize the spider's venom, how could an ordinary mortal withstand it? Judging by the sheer amount of blood spilled, the recipient of the bite had to have been in a wretched state. How could he have recovered quickly enough to escape? The more Shushan studied the stains, the clearer the picture became. He examined the handprints on the white stones by the pool and the streaks of dried blood nearby, then gathered up his robes and dropped into a crouch. He pressed his ear to the ground near the water's edge. I know where he is now, Shushan said, suddenly opening his eyes. Xuanmin glanced at Shushan, then at the pool. He escaped through the water. Exactly. Shushan straightened up and beckoned to Xuanmin. If we're going to chase someone, we might as well take the shortcut. Xuanmin stared at the brackish water that had been stagnant for what was clearly a long time. He said nothing. Relax. I'm not a big fan of fire, but the control of water is well within my grasp. Shushan stood and dusted off his hands, then reached out for Xuanmin. As he took Xuanmin's hand, Shushan's eyes returned to those archaic characters. A thought struck him. Didn't you mention there were two types of venomous spiders here? One is the life-sharing spider, but what's the other? Could it be what Old Man Chu kept rambling about? A spider whose bite can bind people together for 3 lives. Xuanmin lowered his lashes. Xuanmin's lowered lashes fluttered. He looked up at Shushan. Do you want it? Not really, Shushan said, shaking his head. What would I do with it? My lifespan is already longer than 3 mortal lifetimes. Besides, does it feel any better to get bitten by one of those? I'm just asking, since you avoided bringing any of it up earlier. Xuanmin's calm eye swept over the wall once more, just for a moment. It's not about binding entire lifetimes. The rumors are wrong. They only bind fortune and misfortune. Shushan wasn't actually interested in the spiders. It was just that a stray thought had popped into his mind, and he'd briefly wondered about the tales of 3 lifetimes of love and hate that people often spoke about. Xuanmin's clipped response was enough for him. He nodded, then quirked his mouth into a smile before he yanked Xuanmin's hand. Splash! The two plunged sideways into the black pool, sending up a spray of water that splattered onto the stones and wetted the half-dried bloodstains anew. As they sank into the water, a massive bubble of air enveloped them, carrying them swiftly downward until they vanished into the depths. Okay. We have one more chapter. All right. 209:30. All right. Chapter 35, Valley Array. Beneath the black pool, the lack of daylight cast an illusion of deep night, but it was not yet noon in the world outside. Shitu Zhang and Lunian Qi hadn't entered the county town's gates. Instead, they settled in a roadside tea shop near the outskirts. The shop was neither bustling nor empty. There was little danger. The tables were spaced far enough apart that they didn't have to speak too cautiously, and they could keep an eye on the mountain path at all times. It was perfect for them. "Think they've caught up yet?" Shitu Zhang asked. He sat facing the mountain path and sipped his tea while staring intently at the road, hoping to see Xuanmin and Xu appear. "For some reason, my eyelids been twitching since this morning. It's making me uneasy, but they're both so formidable. There's no way anything could happen to them, right?" Munian Chi had no object to divine information from, so he idly tapped the table with his sticks. Though he appeared calm, that small gesture betrayed his unease. But Shitu Zhang was a nervous fellow. If Lunian Qi voiced his concern, the man might tremble hard enough to knock the table over. Instead, he shook his head and put on a dismissive tone. "Who can say? Maybe you just didn't sleep well." The two men with bamboo baskets, who seemed prepared to head up the mountain, sat at the table beside Lunian Qi and Shitu Zhang. The strangers chatted intermittently as they ate, their voices drifting over. "Did you pass by the river this morning?" "I did. No idea what's going on with the water. It rose like crazy overnight. When I went by this morning, it was nearly up to my shoes. One little movement and it would have overflowed." "Yeah, in the middle of winter, too. Why is it flooding all of a sudden?" "Strange. Strange things happen every year. Maybe it'll recede by tonight. Speaking of, did you see those two groups rushing through town this morning? One in gray, the other in white. The other all in white. It was downright eerie." The other man snorted. "You're so clueless. I didn't see the ones in gray, but the white robes one? They're from the Council of Imperial Sacrifices. Pig shots. Look all you want, but keep your mouth shut around them." Their conversation abruptly cut off as a dozen or so gray-clad figures entered the tea shop. They wore masks and bamboo hats, bizarre attire that made it look like they'd wandered out of a temple fair or opera. Shitu Zhang's fingers tightened around his teacup as his unease grew. He faintly heard one of the gray-clad figures murmur, "Do the birth charts match?" "Yes, right there," another replied in a low voice. "But doesn't matter. Take everyone," a third voice interjected. Cold sweat broke out on Shitu Zhang's forehead. He nudged Lunianchi's hand, wanting to pull him away from these strange men, but before he could stand, a hum like the sound of empty bamboo rang in his ears. His vision went dark, his legs buckled, and he lost consciousness. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Wuchang Prefecture, a long procession of white-robed figures rode at a gallop along the road. Their white robes were embroidered with the ancient beast motifs on the front, and their faces were hidden behind savage but solemn masks. As they traveled, their white robes billowed behind them like clouds. The chief diviner and the chief ritualist were still leading the Court of Imperial Sacrifices procession. Earlier, while passing through Wuchang Prefecture, they'd heard from a passerby that two other groups from Taichang Temple had already gone past, which left the townfolk both curious and fearful. Such a large deployment from the court never boded well, because it usually meant a major calamity had happened somewhere or an omen had threatened the security of the imperial court. The past 2 years had borne the weight of ill fortune, unpredictable seasons, droughts, and floods. Winters came early and lasted too long, devouring spring and autumn in their path. The winters dragged on, with heavy snowfall all the way from the northern deserts to the southern mountains. The bone-chilling cold, punctuated by sporadic rains, cast a suffocating pall over all the people. It had begun with a baseless rumor. The tale of a dragon falling into the sea, portending troubled times ahead. So predicting, foretelling. Some believed them, others dismissed them, but now that the court was making frequent appearances, even the skeptics were unsettled. It was as if a 1,000-pound sword hung over their heads, impossible to defend against and ready to drop without warning. The chief diviner's group had originally been following traces of the true dragon without a clear destination, but upon hearing of the other court members' movements, they had become certain they needed to head west. Before long, they received a message by carrier pigeon from the junior minister. The letter warned of an impending disaster in the next few days. They received orders from the state preceptor to rush to Lake Dongting, while another cavalry unit was headed to Mount Wanxi by the river in Langshou. The message urged the chief diviner and chief ritualist to complete their tasks quickly and await further instructions from the state preceptor. The state preceptor. Sure enough, as they neared Yusho Prefecture, the chief diviner found her fingers on the reins burning faintly. Her delicate brow creased behind her mask. She slowed her horse and released the reins. As she let go, a hint of yellow flame sparked between her fingers. Not scalding, but still hot. A thin sheet of paper emerged from the golden tongue of flame, growing clearer as the fire dimmed. The chief diviner raised a hand to signal a halt. The entire lengthy procession stopped at a fork in the road. "What did the chief preceptor say?" the chief ritualist asked. "He wants us to go to Daze Temple on Mount Jingsong," she replied, passing him the paper. "Daze Temple? That haunted place? There aren't even any monks there. What does he want us to do?" But the state preceptor had laid his instructions out clearly in black and white. Arrive at Daze Temple before 1 in the afternoon. Guard the array. Guard the array? The chief ritualist read out in surprise. Behind her mask, the chief diviner's expression shifted slightly. After a pause, she murmured, "Lake Dongting, Mount Wanxi, Daze Temple? These places are hundreds of miles apart. We're to guard the array. What about the junior minister's team? Will they do the same?" "Probably not. If so, how enormous would this array be?" "It'd be beyond anything we've ever encountered," the chief ritualist said. "But I think..." The chief diviner hesitated, leaving a long pause before she spoke again. Never mind. Let's hurry to Daze Temple first." Time was tight if they were to reach Daze Temple before 1. They didn't have the luxury to linger in further thought. With a wave, the chief ritualist and chief diviner spurred the horses forward and led the group straight toward Mount Jingsong. I feel sorry for the horses. Over 100 miles? Let alone the fact that they've already been riding for who knows how long. While they were taking a shortcut around Yusho Prefecture, Shu Xian and Xuanmin rose from the depths of the black waters, still encased in their bubble. Carried by the current, they eventually surfaced in a spring. The moment they broke the water's surface, the bubble burst with a pop, and the current of mountain water cascaded down the cliff, nearly drenched them from head to toe. Wordlessly, they climbed ashore. Xuanmin wore a cleansing spell. Xuanmin wrote a cleansing spell in the air over both of them. In the blink of an eye, the water evaporated, leaving their robes dry, light, and free of any lingering dampness. Even the film of sweat from the blazing dragon baking them earlier was gone. Shushan shook out his black robes with satisfaction. Once he'd flicked off the last droplet, he surveyed their surroundings. They were in a deep mountain hollow, though it was quite unlike the one on Mount Boji, where Xuanmin's bamboo pagoda had been located. Here, all they saw were towering, precipitous stone peaks, arranged like the fingers of an upturned hand, cupping them within. The cliffs carved the sky away, leaving only a glimpse of it directly overhead. It was like a natural well. There are 3 peaks in total, Shushan said, pointing at the nearest one. That peak towered over the clouds, its walls so steep they seemed to have been pared by a knife. By contrast, its top hooked like an eagle's beak, beneath which hung dense curtains of green vines, twisting and winding. Look familiar. Though he had phrased it as a question, his tone was certain. This matched the description of the entrance to Baichang Cave as given by Old Man Chu. Though this legendary entrance had been their exit, it still gave Shushan and Xuanmin a general idea of where they were. In the vicinity of Langshou's Mount Xia. The moment Shushan emerged from the spring pool, he felt the thick yin energy within the valley. Though not as foul as the corpse shop, it still carried a stale, rotting stench, as if a wooden box sealed tight for decades had been pried open. Ugh. The damp air, mixed with the scent of dust, made the area feel gloomy and abandoned. Instinct told him that people had died here, and not just 1 or 2. He frowned at the wild grass by his feet. He nudged it lightly with his toe, and sure enough, discovered traces of blood near the roots, blending almost invisibly into the wet mud. Found it, he said. He patted Xuanmin, but there was no response. Shushan looked up at Xuanmin and saw his attention pull back from the sea of wild grasses, like he'd been somewhere far away. He looked at what Shushan was pointing to with his foot and grasped his meaning. The blood hasn't congealed yet. Shushan withdrew his foot. What's wrong with you? He asked in a low voice, while still listening to the sounds in the valley. Xuanmin was oddly hesitant. I think I've been here before. Shushan darted his eyes at Xuanmin before looking away. Instead of lingering on the comment, Shushan followed the trail of blood droplets forward. Honestly, why does everything seem familiar to you? Shushan said, keeping his tone light. In truth, he'd been grappling with a nagging sense of unease throughout their journey. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed as though he had missed something crucial. Something was off, but it kept slipping his mind, or he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He'd carried this odd feeling the whole way, and now it suddenly clicked. This discomfort wasn't just unease. It was a nameless sense of crisis, like he had ignored a serious latent threat, knowingly or unknowingly. Xuanmin didn't answer Shushan's question right away. He only lowered his eyes. His expression remained stoic, but an indescribable weight seemed to settle over him, as though he were carrying an immense burden. A moment later, Xuanmin closed his eyes, then reopened them and shook his head. Shushan blinked and cut Xuanmin off before he could continue. Let's find this person first. Your memory hasn't improved much. Recalling things won't be so easy. Maybe once the seal on another coin is broken, things will become clear. Clearer. Xuanmin seemed to sense something from Shushian, but he didn't say more before striding ahead. The bloodstain Shushian had discovered really did expose the other party's trail. After barely any effort, the two of them stopped outside a small stone forest. The forest was less than 40 yards in length and width, not large at all, but it was an excellent location for an 8 gates array. If someone was hiding in it, they could stall any pursuers for a while, provided that they weren't up against Shushian. What's the point of hiding in there? Shushian stopped and said to the stone forest in a bored tone, "If you were hiding in town, I might have to watch out for other people, but you're way out here in the mountains, so I have no such reservations. Do you really think a few paltry rocks can stop me?" A single swipe of his dragon's tail would reduce them to nothing. The only reason Shushian had taunted the stranger instead of attacking outright was to see if the man had any tricks up his sleeve. If he did, better to draw them out and deal with everything in one go. After Shushian's words, the stone forest fell into a brief, eerie silence before a low, hoarse laugh sounded. It was broken and halting, as if the speaker was gravely injured. Then the laughter ceased, and a sharp, piercing whistle rose. "Since you've chased me to my doorstep, I ought to show some hospitality." Accompanying his words was a tide of wailing that crashed in like the sea, engulfing everything. As the cries rose, the patch of sky overhead was swallowed. Thick clouds swarmed, ensnaring all light and plunging the entire valley into gloom. Shushian suddenly remembered that a century ago a great fire sparked by lightning had raged through the mountains of Langshou. It was said that the flames burned for 3 days and 3 nights, consuming every last villager living in the valley. That year, rumors spread of people hearing the mountains weep. In reality, it hadn't been the mountains that were weeping. It had been the countless ghosts of those who perished in the fire wailing in unison. Shushian felt the very ground quiver beneath the weight of their cries. The deserted valley echoed with a cacophony of rambling as the earth split open. Corpses buried for a century shed their decaying flesh, clawed their way out of the soil, and an immense, overwhelming wave surged toward Shushian and Xuanmin. Commanding so many yin corpses was no ordinary feat. The one hiding in the stone forest could not have been an insignificant underling. This was surely the sorcerer Song Yun himself. When Shushian realized this, he felt a sharp pain lance through his spine, as if the agony of having his tendons and bones ripped out during his calamity had resurfaced. They knew that it was just the fine threads extending from his spine trembling under the influence of the countless yin spirits, but the agony of his fractured bones only stoked his fury. Past grievances merged with present hatred. Stench of decay filled the air as the endless tide of corpses eddied toward them, drowning the stone forest. Shushian's expression turned frosty with rage. He waited motionless, watching the onslaught of corpses, then tossed his sleeve. A thick veil of mist swallowed him whole. Moments later, a black dragon soared into the night, piercing the clouds with a deafening roar. The mountains shuddered as chaotic thunderbolts wrapped in gale-force winds slashed into the valley. Streaks of lightning struck with ruthless precision. The densely packed corpses in the valley were blasted apart like a scattered hornet's nest. The stone forest exploded under thunderous assault, and within the flying debris, a gray figure rolled across the ground and vanished into the sea of corpses. As he slipped into the tide, he cloaked himself in an illusion, blending seamlessly with the rotting corpses. For a moment, it was impossible to distinguish him. Shushian circled the mountains once before sweeping his massive tail down with earth-shattering force, smashing it into the valley. Boom! Where his tail landed, a spiderweb of fissures snaked outward. The raging storm sent corpses flying by the dozens before they crashed back down in heaps, shattering into fragments of bone and flesh. Entire mounds of corpses were swept into the deep chasms. Simultaneously, a fiery dragon emerged from one side of the valley, its wild flames licking upward as it howled through the whipping wind, dragging wave after wave of yin corpses into the inferno. Shushan hovered amid the black clouds, watching with cold fury as the wailing corpses struggled and fell under the onslaught. Yet his true quarry, Song Yun, scurried about like a rat in the sewers, transforming himself into a corpse, complete with decaying flesh sloshing off white bones. What was the point of hiding? What difference did it make if he died now compared to minutes later? The threads in Shushan's spine quivered with fury, growing increasingly unstable as his spiritual energy drained. The pain stabbed into his muscles and bones. Shushan couldn't ignore it, but the pain only fueled his rage. In mere moments, the majority of the corpses had fallen victim to the thunder and flames. They were shattered by the dragon tail and tumbled into the depths within the fissures as the valley quaked. Amid the wails of the corpses, a hoarse scream rang out. Ah! Shushan laughed maliciously, and his tail whipped across the stone peak without hesitation. With a deafening crack, the peak split at its midpoint, collapsing into the valley along with countless boulders, directly onto the source of the scream. Dust and smoke billowed up, forming a cloud that carried the smell of soil and grit. Are you ready for this super cool picture? This illustrator was cooking. Right? Such a cool picture. I like how they did the shading. Right? Be one hell of a tattoo. A lot of this book would be super cool tattoos. Like this as a back tattoo. Very, very cool. The horde of corpses in that area, along with the boys, were now pinned beneath the fallen peak. Even if they weren't crushed, they'd never rise again. It really does have so much going on. Was that it? Had he gotten his revenge just like that? Shushan had never intended to question the sorcerer. In his eyes, exchanging even a single word with Song Yun was beneath him. No excuse or explanation was worth hearing, nor did he care to ask anything. Allowing the man to speak another word or live another moment longer was far too much mercy. Yeah. I love Song Yun's look, though he is definitely finding out. Have to admit that would be cool. Yeah. No, that would be a super cool back tattoo. Shushan had never intended to question the sorcerer. In his eyes, exchanging even a single word with Song Yun was beneath him. No excuse or explanation was worth hearing, nor did he care to ask anything. Allowing the man to speak another word or live a moment longer was far too much mercy. Yet the ease with which he had sent his enemy into the abyss left Shushan with an indescribable irritation. After he'd spent half a year dragging his paralyzed legs across countless locations, the foe he'd confronted had been silenced in less than an hour. It was like punching cotton. His fury not only remained unvented, but flared higher. The shattered bones littering the valley began to rustle and stir in the wind. Within an instant, they were reassembled into a legion of yin corpses, and those that had been swallowed by the fissures raised their heads from the darkness. Unscattered by lightning, unburned by fire. They had shattered only to reform, fallen into the depths only to claw their way back out. Now this was a true haunting. In his fury, Shushan actually laughed, because amid the chattering of reknitting bones, he heard the faint sound of breathing, forcibly suppressed. It no longer came from where the peak had fallen. As the corpses stood again and charged forward, Schwanmin's fingers closed around his string of copper coins. The corpses thrashed and lunged, their oppressive yin energy and century-old resentment. Their unjust deaths clung like spiderwebs, ensnaring every living organism in range. Neither Schwanmin nor Shushan could break free from its grip. The stronger a being's yang energy, the greater the pull, which made the dragon in their midst the perfect target. Since the beginning of time, yin and yang had been intertwined. No one could change that. The profound resentment emanating from an army of yin corpses could blight entire landscapes. It would have flayed most targets like a storm of knives, enough to strip them to white bone. Shushan and Schwanmin could subdue it to some extent, but they couldn't negate it entirely. The tide of corpses revived again and again, and thin cuts began to appear on the two men, as if countless fine blades were brushing against them. The longer this dragged on, the more wounds accumulated, while the yin resentment grew thicker each time the corpses were destroyed. Every time they were struck down, the resentment sprang anew, trapping them in a cycle with no end in sight. Shushan didn't care about the cuts. Being drenched in blood mattered little to him. It was nothing compared to the agony he'd suffered during his tribulation. In his frigid anger, he kept hunting for the sorcerer, planning to blast him and everything nearby to smithereens. Then he caught a glimpse of Schwanmin's white-robed figure and paused in surprise. Schwanmin was looking up at him. Shushan was high in the heavens. Schwanmin was far away in the valley below. The distance between them should have been too much for them to see each other's faces. Yet Shushan felt that Schwanmin's gaze carried something unbearably heavy. Schwanmin raised a hand and caught something in the air. He rubbed it between his fingers. Shushan saw a smear of red on Schwanmin's fingertips and realized he had caught a drop of blood that had fallen from the dragon. A painful emotion welled in Shushan's chest. It was as if beneath his skin, a very tender, very vulnerable part of himself had been pricked by a needle. The sting was so sudden that he didn't immediately understand its cause. Before he could dwell on it, Schwanmin lowered his gaze and touched the string of copper coins. Since fire and thunder were useless, Schwanmin withdrew his blazing dragon. He seemed to be murmuring a sutra, and as his fingers brushed the coins, a brilliant light ignited within them. The spiritual energy sealed inside had suddenly awakened. Of the 5 coins, the 3 that had been unsealed shone with blinding radiance, so intense that even Shushan, high above, found them dazzling. The moment the coins were roused by blood, Shushan's spine burned with heat. He froze, then realized the sting earlier might not have been his at all. Rather, it had been what Schwanmin felt, transmitted through the coin's connection. The vague sensation had felt so much like Shushan's own. The coins began to hum in the wind, interrupting Shushan's thoughts. Schwanmin, chanting, held them in one hand while he moved the fingers of his other. An intricate rune rose through the debris and fog. With the deep sound of a tolling bell, it slammed down upon the tide of corpses. Clang! The rune landed, and a shudder rippled through the army of yin corpses, as if their souls had been struck. Their vibrations matched the fading echoes of an ancient bell. Yes, lightning was futile and fire impotent, for yin resentment wasn't something they could banish. Instead, Xuanmin was performing rites for countless vengeful souls, offering them rest all at once. He endured the agony of stabbing blades, his countenance tranquil as he continued to chant, eyes closed. That wasn't a good one. Hang on. There we go. Another strike. The yin corpses in the valley stopped as if bewitched, then slowly turned around. The yin resentment receded from Shushian. Would they target Xuanmin instead? Xuanmin tapped his copper coins rhythmically again and again. The viscous miasma of resentment finally abandoned Shushian and pulsed toward Xuanmin until it enveloped him in layer upon layer of suffocating weight. The horde of corpses howled madly under the ceaseless toil of that phantom bell. Shushian found himself taken aback by the shift. Then, with one whip of his dragon tail, his massive form dissolved into a swirling black mist that plunged straight into the valley. He crashed down in front of Xuanmin, the sheer force of his descent enough to send clusters of corpses flying. The valley rumbled as the black mist dispersed, revealing Shushian's black-clad human form standing protectively in front of Xuanmin. So sweet. Shushian raised a hand as if to shield him from the tsunami of resentment bearing down on them, but then a hollow, searing pain lanced through his spine. After everything he'd done earlier, he drained too much of his spiritual energy. That fragile threads that barely held his spine together were on the verge of snapping once more. For an instant, the feeling in his legs almost vanished. Unable to control himself, he stumbled. The glow from the copper coins in Xuanmin's hands flared, and the coins themselves oscillated wildly as Xuanmin's fingers traced their edges, faster and faster, almost like they were trembling with eagerness or struggling under unbearable strain. The fourth coin's dull, ashen surface began to flake away, revealing a golden sheen beneath its peeling shell. Clang. Xuanmin's eyes remained closed, like he was unaware of his tumultuous surroundings. His deep, measured voice recited the sutras, each word striking like a hammer against a bell, resonating directly into the mind. Amid the overwhelming tide of yin resentment, amid the writhing and shrieking of the corpses, the last fleck of gray on the fourth copper coin fell away. It shivered hard. A sharp click echoed in Shushian's mind, like a lock that had just been picked open. That was the shared sensation of the coin's seal breaking, transmitted from Xuanmin. The reverberation was impossible to resist. A sudden wave of dizziness crashed over Shushian. His vision turned dark, followed by fragmented scenes plunging forward like a flood. Shushian's perspective abruptly shifted, as though he had been pulled into the body of a child. His gaze, no longer under his control, slid downward to fix upon the hem of a robe before him. Hang on. The ground was cloaked with heavy snow that almost reached his knees. A low desk was in front of him. Books were spread across its surface, while a brush rested on a stand, the ink at its tip encrusted in a thin layer of ice. A muffled voice drifted down from above him. "You were born with Buddha bones. That must not be squandered. Stay here and transcribe the scriptures. I will come back for you when night falls." He said nothing, just lifted the brush to moisten it in the inkstone before he pressed it to the thin paper. Time blurred and soon the sky darkened. The characters on the page were no longer legible. Shushian heard the crunch of snow as someone approached the desk. He lifted his eyes just enough to see the white-robed figure return. Still, he did not look at the man's face. With something that seemed like both reverence and indifference, he settled on the man's hands. The man produced a copper brazier from his sleeve and offered it to him. "Are you cold?" he asked, voice solemn. Shushan wanted to scoff. "Try standing here all day and see if you're cold." What actually emerged was a curt "no." The voice's tone remained indistinct, both inches away and decades distant, but Shushan could tell it was a child's voice. It possessed a coldness utterly uncharacteristic of a child, though. The man sighed. "Your Shifu has no wish to harm you. I simply do not wish for you to waste your life when you were blessed with Buddha bones." As he spoke, he pressed the brazier into the child's arms, then kindly patted the back of his head with a large hand before leading him through the deep snow toward a small building in the distance. Shushan clung to a sliver of clarity in his dreamlike haze. This was Xuanmin's memory. Without warning, another wave of dizziness churned in Shushan's skull. He shut his eyes and shook his head. When he opened his eyes again, the scene before him had fragmented, transforming into chaos. Sometimes it showed a cold, empty hall, other times a pavilion. At times, silence enveloped him. At others, faint murmurs of conversation drifted from beyond the courtyard. His perspective shifted, rising and falling as if the memories weren't unfolding in order. Then, as warmth flared along his spine and a faint hum buzzed in his ears, his connection with Xuanmin stabilized. The fragmented scenes grew a little clearer. A desk lay before him once more. A messenger pigeon perched obediently on one corner, resting. A peaceful scene, yet it seemed laced with a trace of fear. In his hand was a folded sheet of paper covered in sprawling handwriting. As at a glance, he only caught the red seal at the bottom, where a few characters were stamped. He'd barely made out two before his fingers moved on their own, refolding the paper and setting it aside. Those two characters were Tai Chang. He picked up the brush from its stand, dipped it in ink, and wrote a few brief words on another sheet. "Must not delay the journey to Mount Tai." Then beneath it he added two more characters, Tong Dang. A dull roar filled Shushan's mind. He thought he must have misread, but before he could look closer, the scene trembled and shifted abruptly once more. He stood by the railing of a high pavilion. A palace lantern cast a hazy glow beside him. The lingering confusion from seeing Tong Dang had yet to fade, leaving Shushan dazed for a long moment before he realized someone behind him was speaking. He didn't catch what was said, but he turned mechanically, walked to a stone table in the pavilion, and pushed a sheet of paper forward. Then he opened his mouth to speak. Though the scene remained vague and the voice distant, Shushan could still recognize Xuanmin's timbre. He heard himself speak with Xuanmin's cold and detached voice. "The year of Wu Chen, the 7th day of the 6th month." Xuanmin said more after that, or perhaps he asked a question, but Shushan didn't register a single word. A deafening buzz filled his ears. It was as if his entire body had turned to ice. That indifferent sentence looped over and over in his mind, and with each repetition the chill deepened. The stabbing pain in his spine flared again, but Shushan sensed nothing. The year of Wu Chen was this very year, and the 7th day of the 6th month was none other than the day of his tribulation, or rather, the day his tendons and bones had been ripped out. Disbelief crashed over Shushan, a suffocating weight that crushed downward, entangling him. In his daze, he desperately searched the scene for any other detail, anything that could prove those words a mere coincidence. But he only found the edge of the stone table, where something caught his eye. The moment it did, a feeling flickered in his hollow chest, so faint it hadn't It didn't seem like his own, an emotion that might have been discussed. Shushan had no mind to dwell on it because he saw what was set on the table. 2 masks, one silver, gleaming coldly under the lantern light. The other was painted with bold, archaic beast motifs, its solemn design flanked by long, knotted tendrils, resembling wild hair taken from an actual beast. When worn, it would look like flowing locks from a distance. He stared at the beast painted patterned mask, his mind blank. The pain in his spine sharpened. It was unbearable, like the agony of his missing spine had seeped into his heart only to radiate outward, tinging his thoughts with panic and a little grief. The chaotic memories that followed blurred past, vanishing only when the copper coin's hum grew distinct once more. Shushan suddenly squeezed his eyes shut, and after a long wait, he opened them. I have a feeling he's about to be going through it emotionally. And hopefully it's a misunderstanding. The valley came back into focus right in front of Shushan, but somehow distant, as if it were in another world. At some point, Xuanmin had landed on a low peak nearby. The bell-like tolls lingered, echoing through the valley as the corpse's shrieks turned to wails. The century-old miasma of resentment slowly dissipated. A thick mist that obscured Xuanmin's face had risen in the valley. Shushan could only see him turn toward his direction, the copper coin still glowing in his hand. Pale golden runes formed a wide net, enveloping the entire valley. The light wasn't bright, but it seared Shushan's eyes. It reminded him of the golden threads that had bound him by the shore. The grief that had been small surged larger in his chest, heavier than he'd imagined, more suffocating than that inescapable net. It left even him a little stunned. Then, from beneath the pile of bones in the valley, a voice rang out in shock and confusion. State Preceptor? Why are you here? Didn't the message say to meet at Mount Jiang Song? The man, who'd been tumbling about amid the yin corpses, had revealed himself upon recognizing Xuanmin. His disguise still clung to him, making him near indistinguishable from the yin corpses. Chunks of rotting flesh had fallen away during his frantic escape, exposing a jumble of crooked bones. The surfaces were yellowed and blackened, reeking of decay. But the real corpses around him had collapsed under the golden light and been reduced to shattered bones, though wisps of resentment still clung to them. As he stood upright among them, he was impossible to miss. His head was a mere skull, cracked and wrapped in dried skin, the eye sockets empty voids making his expression difficult to read, but from his gaping jaw, he seemed beyond bewildered. Had Shushan struck now, the man wouldn't have reacted in time. However, Shushan could no longer see him. Beyond the golden light of Xuanmin's coins, the valley might as well not have existed. All Shushan registered was the pain in his spine, an agony that stabbed into his heart. It was like watching a blade sink into his chest. Terrifying coldness filled him, bitter as the deepest winter. Rocks, golden light, and thick mist separated him from Xuanmin. Shushan made no move to clear the haze. Through the watery mist, he stared silently at the white figure on the peak before repeating softly, State Preceptor. In that instant, countless past details, both relevant and irrelevant, clear and foggy, flooded his mind in a disordered rush. With a single utterance of State Preceptor, they abruptly snapped into focus. Unusual abilities, ties to the government, a personality that was fastidious to a fault, the procession they'd encountered at Mount Boji. In truth, the clues about Xuanmin's identity had been everywhere. The vague unease plaguing him over the past few days, especially after they'd entered Baichong Cave, now revealed itself to be a subconscious dread, laced with even a hint of fear. He'd sensed it for a long time. He'd just chosen to ignore it. Even now, after experiencing Xuanmin's memories firsthand through the coins, he clung to one last shred of hope. He still wanted to hear it from Xuanmin's own lips. He'd played the fool. He'd play the fool. If only Xuanmin would deny it. If only he'd say no. The year of Wu Chen. The 7th day of the 6th month, Xuxian murmured, staring at the white silhouette behind the mist. The figure seemed to stiffen, but the mist was too thick. He couldn't be sure if he was seeing things. What does that date mean? Xuxian asked, his voice eerily calm. In his entire life, he had never cared so deeply for another answer. For a second, he almost regretted the question, wanted to take it back. He feared the truth like he never had before. But the man on the peak had once told him, I won't lie to you. Xuanmin was silent for what felt like an eternity, so long that Xuxian's chest went numb. Then in a low, rough voice, he answered, A dragon's tribulation. Xuxian's lashes fluttered. He closed his eyes. When they opened again, his face was blank. He cast a final glance at Xuanmin, then with a calm that bordered on terrifying, he said one word. Excellent. And that is where we are going to end tonight. So you get to end with pain. End with pain. But but thankfully, yay, pain. Thankfully, we will be continuing on Thursday. So you don't have to wait a week this time. But yeah, we are down to the last 2 parts. So we will actually finish next Tuesday, which is exciting. Yeah. Oh boy, right? Okay, well, we certainly went through quite a bit tonight and learned quite a bit of backstory tonight. It's all coming together. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone that joined me during the live. I always love and appreciate having you here. It makes it so much more fun. But yeah, I have a feeling that Valley's about to get wrecked. I think so, Truffle. I think a lot of things are about to be broken. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. Yes. Oh, you're welcome. But yeah, have a good night, everyone. For those of you watching later, I hope you enjoyed as well. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Oop. There we go.